how to ace the technical phone interview with a guest speaker that is Chris Connolly, who is one of the head engineers over at Real Scout. He's been doing a lot of interviewing recently and has some tips for you guys for your technical phone interviews today.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Pretty excited to not only share some of my experience from being an interviewer, but also over the years I've done lots of interviews myself. So hopefully both of those experiences will be pretty relevant to you guys. I'm Chris Connolly, as Laura mentioned. I've been doing web development for around 10 years and about 5 years as a technical lead. Probably given close to 100 phone technical interviews and done dozens of on-site interviews. And like I mentioned, I've also done my fair share of interviews from the candidate side, successfully and also not so successfully. We're attempting to record this video, so don't feel like you have to take notes or anything. We'll hopefully be posting out a video and a link later on. I work at Real Scout. We make software for real estate agents, and I'm really excited. We just launched our engineering blog at eatcodeplay.com, so if you have a few minutes, check that out at some point. There's not that much content on there yet, but we'll be building that up. So to get started, let's define what the technical phone interview is. So usually the technical phone interview is kind of like the second stage in the interviewing process. You've already had kind of like the introductory call with maybe a non-engineer or an engineer at the company. And now it's time to talk to an engineer and show your technical chops. It's usually not as taxing as what you'll see in on-site interviews, but they still can be pretty demanding technically. And usually after this step, you might have another phone interview. I've had up to 3 or 4 technical phone interviews before coming in as an on-site, but then usually the next step would be to come in for an on-site interview. And specifically for our case, I'm talking about, technical phone interviews for full stack developers, usually at small to medium-sized companies. That's where my experience lies, and probably most of the companies that you guys will be looking at after the program. And by the way, who has already graduated from App Academy versus who's come in? Who's currently in the program right now? Everyone? Okay, all right. I don't even know. Yeah, you tell me. Sleeping on the cots, or what's that?
We're looking for jobs like now.
Okay, cool. So my goal is, and my hope is that you have a very clear understanding of how to prepare for a technical interview, what to expect going in, and be able to rock the technical interview after this talk. This is a no-holds-barred talk. I'm going to tell you everything I know about interviewing, what I expect. At the end, I'll even tell you our technical phone interview, which we're using currently. And then at the end, I'll open up to any and all questions that you want to ask me as an interviewer. So what are interviewers looking for? Joel Spolsky boiled it down very well, and he said, we're looking for folks that are smart, get things done, and they're not a jerk, basically. And that pretty much wraps up my mentality, too, of, when I'm looking for folks to join my team. So during the interview process, we're basically trying to find every single clue that support or reject those things. And the more clues that you can give us to help us figure that out, it's very difficult in the interview process to find out if someone's going to be a right fit on your team. But the more clues you can give us, the better. At the same time, the technical phone interview is not just all about them getting, the interviewer getting information. It's also about you getting information you need from that person. So this might be the first time you're talking to an engineer in the company, so it's a great time to find out what the engineering culture is, what types of technical problems they're working on, what type of growth opportunities there are, and learning and training and all that good stuff. So today we're going to talk kind of in general the interview process, how to prepare beforehand, what to expect during, and how to follow up afterwards. Then we'll talk about some different types of technical interviews, and we'll wrap up with some resources and tips. But before we get started, I just want to touch on a personal story because I think it's pretty relevant to you guys here. But back in 2006, I was actually working at a power company as an engineer, not in web dev at all. I got into web development and just because I wanted to build an app for my family, so I bought a book on PHP and MySQL. We unfortunately didn't have App Academy back then, and I'm from the East Coast. But I fell in love with it and taught myself, and it was a lot of fun. I was spending like all my spare time coding. And at the same time, I was like, oh, there's got to be other people out there like me. So I joined up with a co-working space, started going to meetups and everything, which was awesome. Met a lot of cool people. But at the same time, when I introduced myself, I was like, I work at a power company, but I do web development on the side. I didn't want to call myself a web developer. I didn't feel worthy of it, I guess. So then a few months later, a couple of my friends from the co-working space and we built a web app for iPhone users, became somewhat popular in the Philadelphia area, and that led to a full-time consulting gig after that. And then at that point, I was off to the races in my web development career. So I mention that now because you guys are all coming from all walks of life. You probably haven't done much web development prior to the last month or two. And it's sometimes hard to say, okay, I am a web developer. You're still kind of in the mindset of I'm a lawyer or a financial analyst or whatever. And this is hugely important when you're in the interview process. Like you guys all now are full stack web developers. You're in one of the best programs in the country. You're learning things at an incredible pace, and you're going to go on to do really awesome things in development. So just keep that in mind during the interview process when you might start, you might trip up a little bit and, feel like this isn't for you, but just believe it. So repeat after me. I am a full stack developer. Whew. All right, so I promise this whole thing isn't a motivational speech, so let's get into the meat of it. So like I said, we're going to talk about kind of the interview process as it pertains to the phone screen, preparation during and after. And let's talk about preparation first. So obviously the first thing is you have to schedule it. The interviewing can be quite a whirlwind. You might be talking to several companies at the same time, and you don't want to stack up your technical interviews all in a row. John was just saying he had an on-site interview today, but they can be very mentally exhausting. So try not to schedule more than 2 technical phone interviews in a day, at most 3, and make sure you have some space in between them. Related to that and somewhat contradictory is that schedule every interview you can get. The more practice you have, the better. And we're going to talk about practice a lot during the rest of this talk. Also, when you're scheduling, whoever you schedule the interview with should let you know who you're going to be talking to, what type of interview it's going to be, and pretty much everything to expect about the interview. If they're not being forthcoming with that, you should definitely feel free to ask them. Say, hey, who am I going to be interviewing with, and what are we going to be covering? And any special requirements. Do I need to be online? Are we going to be programming in my language of choice, your language of choice, what have you? Another question that may come up is how much research to do on the person that you're interviewing with and the company that you're interviewing with. Hopefully you've already kind of done your research on the company because you're excited about interviewing with this company. You've probably already had the introductory phone call. But then also take, 5 to 15 minutes to kind of look up who you're interviewing with. See if you can find a GitHub profile. See if you can find their LinkedIn. Do they have a blog, Twitter account, anything? Like, you don't have to go crazy. But if you can find something interesting that they've done, maybe they've posted an interesting article on Twitter, or maybe they've written some cool code on GitHub, it can make for some interesting banter and kind of lighten things up during the technical interview. Plus, it kind of flatters the interviewer too. That says, hey, they're prepared and they want to find out more about me. As part of your research, make sure you prep questions. So like I mentioned, this might be the first time you're talking to an engineer at the company, so it's a great time to ask things about how they work, what their culture is and whatnot. So you might ask things like, how do features get prioritized and worked on? What is a day, a standard day look like? What do you like working about? What do you like most about working at the company? Is it the food? Is it the technical challenges? Is it the growth opportunity? Is it the impact you're making? Stuff like that. Definitely go in with some good engineering-focused questions. I said we talk about practice quite a bit earlier, but definitely practice. Interviewing it's a situation you're not used to. It's a little bit uncomfortable. And the more you can get comfortable with the tools and the types of interviews and the questions that you're going to run into, the better off you'll be in the actual interview. And I'll go into more specifics for each type of interview on how to practice a little bit later on. And another kind of no-brainer, but I've made this mistake a couple of times, is make sure you're set up for a good environment during the call. So don't go to a coffee shop where it can be noisy. Don't park outside of a coffee shop hoping Wi-Fi will drift over towards you. I've done it before, and it just adds another point of stress for you. And you want everything just to be quiet. You want to have good phone reception. You'll usually want to be online. So just make sure you have your environment all set up, ready to go before the call. So during the call, just a few things in general here, but usually there'll be a little bit of chit-chat in the beginning to kind of get a quick overview on the person. The person will give you a little bit of background maybe, and you'll be able to give some background to them. Just a couple of quick pointers on that. Don't take more than 5 minutes ever. Like 2 or 3 minutes is great. Also, you can talk about your experience, but don't just list off your LinkedIn or resume. The interviewer should have already read that, so they already have a pretty good idea. And you're just going to bore the interviewer by kind of listing off those things. Don't even go into more specifics about each project from a feature standpoint. Like, the interviewer probably won't care that much about what features were added while you were on that project. What they are interested in, or what did you do technically or interesting on that project? So throw in some things like, yeah, you might have worked here or there or did a cool project here at App Academy. Throw in something like, this was my favorite part of App Academy. This project was really cool because we achieved 100% test coverage, and I got to learn more about Ruby internals like define method and include and exclude and stuff. That'll get the interviewer excited and know that you actually have the experience that you've listed on your resume. So this is easier said than done, but keep your cool. Like, the interviewer's job is not to make this an easy, task for you. They're going to be trying to push your boundaries. And it's not because they want to make you feel stupid. It's just because they're trying to get a complete grasp on, your experience and your abilities. So it's okay to flub up in the interviews. It's going to happen. The interviewer shouldn't be expecting perfection. So just try to keep that in mind. If things start not going that well, maybe going off track a little bit, just keep your cool. You're doing fine, and you'll get through it. And then in closing, you have your prepped questions. Make sure you get all those answered. Definitely find out what the next steps are and when you should be hearing back and by whom. So make sure you get a commitment for, okay, I'll hear back in a day or whatever about scheduling the next step. And granted, I'm not perfect at that. I was supposed to get back to John, not to call you out, sorry, yesterday. So after the interview, following up, definitely send a follow-up note, a thank you, as soon as you can. It's pretty flattering, at least for me, to get a thank you and a follow-up immediately after the interview with the candidate saying how much they enjoyed learning more about the company and that hopefully the interview was fun. Maybe they're lying, but that's okay. And just take it as another opportunity to relate your enthusiasm for the company and thank them for their time. And definitely try to do that same day if it's not immediately after. So similarly, if things didn't go that well, you should still follow up, and especially if you're still really enthusiastic about the company. Maybe it didn't go well because the interviewer was a big jerk and you don't want to work there anymore, but if you're still very interested and it didn't go well, still reach out in the same manner. Take an extra effort to show your enthusiasm. maybe mentioned, oh, I'm sorry I had a bad day, or like I don't think this went as well as I can perform. How about we try something that like even suggest a next step or something that where you feel like you can prove your strengths and whatnot. That enthusiasm can go a long way. And for some reason you haven't heard back in the allotted time, definitely send a second follow-up. Like you don't want to be emailing and calling like every 6 hours, but if it's been a day or two past when you thought you'd hear back from, definitely it's totally fine to send a second follow-up. Take it as another opportunity to show your enthusiasm and thank the interviewer again. So that was just kind of general stuff. But let's talk about some types of interviews now. So the interviews that I've either encountered or do now as an interviewer are knowledge-based questions, experience-based questions, code design. It's not like design making things pretty. Like remote exercises where you're actually coding online on the phone, and then take-home code challenges. So we'll start off with the knowledge-based questions. These might be around coding syntax, database APIs, language features, design patterns like object-oriented stuff, stuff like that. So a couple examples would be, explain polymorphism. How does method lookup work in Ruby? What's the difference between left, right, outer joins? Have you used dependency injection before, and can you, what did you like about it, or what were the pros and cons? Can you explain the quicksort algorithm? So this is a way for interviewers just to kind of get a general idea of your experience. Don't get scared about those questions. I don't imagine you guys would be, encountering them. It's more for people that have been in developing for quite some time. Just so the interviewer can kind of get a handle on, what have you had experience with in your past. And they don't hold that much weight, at least in my opinion. I don't even ask these questions myself, but you will encounter them. And there's no magic bullet or silver bullet or whatever for these. Just keep coding and gaining experience. There is a pretty cool site called smarterer.com, which I'll list later. But it's basically an aptitude test a crowdsourced aptitude test for different technologies. So if you're interested, you can go in and take the Rails test and kind of get an idea of some of the questions that might be asked. So on to experience-based questions. These are usually, maybe the interviewer will pick out one or two interesting things on your resume and take a deeper dive. So I think I have a couple of examples here. So, if you've worked in Ruby, what's your favorite language feature? What do you hate about it? And then kind of an example of a generic question is, hey, saw you used Redis at Acme Inc. Can you tell me more about how you used it, why you chose to use it? What other alternatives did you think to use? What were the performance or business gains that came from that decision? What was the hardest part about implementing that solution? Those are just a few examples of where the conversation could go. So beforehand, be prepared to talk about everything on your resume, especially the things that you consider interesting. Refresh your memory about what you actually did and what projects you worked on and what excited you about those projects. So on to design-based questions. These they're a step up above code. So it's not talking about coding syntax or actually how you would write something out, but how would you design a complicated system into simpler parts? So like how would you structure different classes? What database would you choose? Why? Stuff like that. And this is really important. You'll probably encounter most of these design type questions in an on-site because they can get more complicated and it's kind of hard to keep it within half an hour or an hour phone call. But this is really important. Like the code design is, I'm sure you've heard of the 10x programmer, this mythical 10x programmer. And it's not because they're 10x productive because they can type faster or they're geniuses. It's because they take a lot of time to design well thought out code that's simple to maintain and update in the future. So the interviewer in this case is really trying to get a handle on how would you break apart a problem, basically. So one example would be, in an object-oriented fashion, design a deck of cards. And so, we'd probably have a deck class and a card class, and you would have methods like shuffle and whatnot. And the interviewer is looking for you to kind of talk that out. Similarly, with design a file system, you might have a directory, a file, permissions, stuff like that. And then kind of moving away from kind of object-oriented stuff, more architecture type questions. And this one is definitely, probably you won't see in a phone interview, even though I have it up here, but you might see a variation of it. But say you're getting 1 billion page views per day, and you want to be able to query something in the future to tell whether a user has visited a page or not. What type of database would you use? What would you have to actually store? How would you do the query? And so being able to talk through that type of stuff would be something that would be happening in this type of interview. So this is really about breaking down the problem. Talk and talk and talk. Whatever you're thinking, just talk out loud. Consider all alternatives. The first thing that you come up with might not be the best way to go. It might be. Ask clarifying questions. Question what the problem at hand is. So for the tracking page views, nowhere in the initial description did I say we need to keep data for a year or for a week. So ask those requirement type questions of like, okay, what are the constraints for me? So exercise-based questions. This is my preferred interview type, and they're becoming a lot more popular with the online code editors that can run code in any language that you can think of, pretty much. They're becoming the code editors are giving the interviewers the ability now to perform it, and they're pretty popular because they're pretty much the closest thing we can get to actually what we do as coders day to day, actually coding. So a few examples would be, take a file of integers and sum them up. Write a regular expression to parse out URLs in some document or something. Write a countdown timer in JavaScript and HTML, so it counts down by seconds, minutes, and hours. And then I'm not going to list out all the algorithm type questions, but you'll probably get a lot of these algorithmic type questions versus the other practical ones above. And I'll have some resources to kind of give you examples of all the different types of algorithm questions that you might get. So again, the interviewer is trying to get kind of a handle on your coding chops as well as your problem-solving chops. It's similar. How you want to tackle this is make sure you're asking questions, talking out loud, considering alternatives, letting the interviewer know when there's this extra complicated part over here, but I'm not going to consider it right now. So you break down the problem into smallest steps as you possibly can and take those baby steps. So get something working as soon as possible. You don't have to take care of every single edge case right off the bat, but it's also a good time to let the interviewer know that you are considering all the edge cases. I'll have some more resources again at the end, but there's a great site called interviewcake.com with practice interview questions like this. There's a great book. And definitely check out all of the online code editors. Get familiar with their interfaces, know how to interact with them before the interview. So then lastly, the take-home challenges. They can range from anywhere to 1 to 4 hours or more. And they're usually, or sometimes can be closed book, where they'll ask you not to do any Google searching or anything. They're usually a lot more challenging than what you encounter like in a remote online pairing exercise. But they can be a lot of fun. I've gotten addicted to a couple code challenges as a candidate before, so they can be fun. And then the reason I'm mentioning here as a phone interview is because oftentimes your next phone interview will be to discuss your solution. So a couple of examples. Write an efficient way of searching through over 1 million variable names. So you might have underscore variable names, and you want to match on every beginning part after an underscore. So not just if it's day underscore number. If you typed in N, it would match that variable name. If you typed in D, it would match that variable name as well. Build a game. My choice is Hangman, but it could be any game. Build an interactive game. Or it could be as simple as build a simple web app and put tests on it. Hopefully, the interviewer is a little bit more creative than just asking for a to-do app, but it could be something along those lines. And how to do well in this is, source control it, put it up on GitHub, write tests if that's your thing. Create a well-written, detailed README of kind of an overview of, how to run the code if possible, how to run tests, all that stuff. And then in the actual phone interview, be prepared to talk about your solution, discussing alternative solutions that you may have thought of but decided against. Where does your solution fall down, or where is it imperfect? What could you improve? Be prepared to go really deep on your implementation and how to improve it. So that about wraps up the different types of interviews. I'll quickly go through some resources and then finish up with a couple tips and a little bit more information around our interview process. So the first up there is a blog post by Steve Yagi. It's the target audience is interviewers, but definitely check it out to get an idea of how the interviewer mind works, I guess, and what they're thinking. And there's a lot of example interview questions in there as well. Cracking the Coding Interview is an awesome book. It has much of kind of like the general interview practices and how to prepare and stuff in it, but then it also, most of the book is dedicated to different types of example interview questions that you might encounter. An interview cake is similar every week. I believe they have a new interview question that you can practice with. I mentioned Smarterer for, honing your knowledge-based questions, or at least getting an idea of what you might encounter. And then for kind of like the fun algorithmic problems that you might encounter either in a take-home challenge or an online coding exercise. HackerRank has a lot of fun stuff on it. Big O Cheat Sheet is a pretty cool overview of all the different types of algorithms, and Project Euler also has a lot of fun problems on there. And here are a list of online editors that I've either used as an interviewer or encountered other interviewers using for the online coding session. The first two, Google, you might be coding in Google Docs. It was pretty intimidating for me because you don't have your syntax highlighting, and it's, I don't know, but you might encounter that. Collab Edit does have syntax highlighting, but you can't run the code there. And then the last three are all, you can actually write your code and run it and interact with it. Okay, so up until now we've been kind of talking somewhat general terms, but now I want to get specific to what I'm looking for in an interview and be a little bit subjective. So if you can do all these things, you'll ace the interview, at least with me. Our technical phone interview, our first one, we usually have one. It's about a 45-minute pairing exercise online. We usually use CoderPad or CodeBunk so we can actually run the code. We start out with summing a file, and then we write tests for it. And then we usually move on to an algorithmic type problem using TDD. So there's a lot on here, but especially this is basically my checklist for a phone interview, especially for folks coming out of App Academy. So over there on the upper left, starting out with the basics like, can you write and call a method? Can you write and instantiate a class? Do you know the difference between a remote and a local file? What's your overall language knowledge? If you tell me Ruby is your best language, then I would expect you to at least be able to, you might not know, and I'm not expecting you to know every single syntax or standard library method, but you should be able to work around it pretty well. How well do you name variables and methods? Do you give it any thought or not? How do you troubleshoot? If we get an exception in our exercise, can you parse that exception and kind of come up with ideas of what might be causing that exception? Again, baby steps. I'm not looking for the grand finale of writing code for 20 minutes and then we figure out if it runs correctly. Like really try to break down the problem into the simplest piece. Or even if you don't even have something that you don't even think it's going to work, I'm looking for someone that's going to check their work continually. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but I'm looking for people that talk through everything. What they're thinking, what implementations are they thinking about, don't they know? Are they asking me questions about either, maybe I didn't explain the problem right, maybe they're confused about a part, maybe we have to design part of it, maybe there's a design requirement that I didn't specify, and I'm really looking, this is one of the most important things, is really looking for that communication and have a good back and forth. Another simple one, what's your technique for finding things, your resources when you don't know something? So it sounds simple, but, and it's even, I guess, weird to say it out loud, but what do you Google for? Do you know what to Google for the right things and whatnot? Or do we flounder a little bit in trying to figure out the next problem? Do you consider alternative versions edge cases, or are you just trying to fly through it? And a little bit about, we don't do much algorithm stuff at RealScout, so I don't test for this too much, but I do want to get a handle on, do you understand some of that, some of the heady algorithm stuff. So can you reason about time and memory space complexity? So just about finishing up, I'll be sending a link to a video, hopefully if that worked out all right, later on tonight or tomorrow. So if you enjoyed this talk and you think some others might enjoy the content, I'd love it if you shared it on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. If you think this talk was complete crap and no one would ever benefit from it whatsoever, but you would like a free practice interview with me on our actual interview question, also feel free to share it on Twitter or Facebook. And then tomorrow, or maybe the next day, I'll randomly select 3 folks who have done that, and we'll get a practice interview scheduled with you. And that it'll be our actual interview question that we'll go through, and I'll provide detailed feedback afterwards. So we just went through the whole interview, pretty much everything I know about being a candidate and an interviewer. And I'm happy to take questions or thoughts right now. I'll try to answer everything and anything. If you'd rather leave your question for later, feel free to email me anytime at chris@realscout.com.